Hello everyone, welcome back. And my name is Dominic, and today we're going to talk about some useful tools in Maya's mesh network system. These tools I'm demonstrating their applications in procedural modeling. However, they've got a bunch of different tool sets and different systems for procedural animation, things like that, VFX. But I want to show you guys how to solve some very useful challenges that you might be facing as an environment artist or a modeler. And so today we're going to be talking about a couple of different things. The first one that we'll start off with is procedurally generating, in our case, buildings using cells or blocks, individual kind of puzzle pieces that are assembled together by the computer. So this is the end goal that we're going for. I'm going to go ahead and delete it just so that way we could see where we start from. So I'm unhiding these. Inside this jumbled mess, I have 7 cubes. Each of these are a little bit different in design. However, they're very low poly and they're each just going to be a building block in terms of the larger assemblage of a building that we're going to bake. So something important about each of these bricks, make sure that whatever components that you want to start off with, have them all UV unwrapped and textured or ready to texture if that's the process that you're doing in your pipeline. So they all have to be unwrapped and ready to go because those are the individual pieces that you will be texturing. That being said, also make sure that you've got their transformations frozen and their history deleted. So once all of that is said and done, I can select all 7 of my objects, or all of my objects in general, and I can navigate to this new shelf mesh right up here, and we can click on the leftmost icon, which is creating a mesh network. So immediately we see some changes, but in our attribute editor, we can see both mesh right here, this library of different nodes that we can add in, and it gives us a distribution node already. And as you can see, this is what has changed these objects in our viewport. So this tells me that it has distributed my object 7 times, or 7, number of points is 7, down a line in a linear fashion. However, I can change this to be another version, such as this grid, where now I can have a dimension, length and width dimension kind of space that I can distribute my objects. So to create this building, I think what I want to do is have this be a 2 by 3 by, we'll do 7 tall grid space. So I've put in my X, Y, and Z kind of attributes there. And now I can change this distance to I'm kind of eyeballing it here, but just to kind of line up with everything. So I can select these guys and just check and see the overlap, and we'll determine if it's good enough, and I'm just kind of eyeballing it, but this is already starting to look really good. So I can go back to my distribution node here, and let's go ahead and space away the y-axis until we get a nice kind of distribution without any kind of spaces in between. So if you reach the very kind of top end of your slider, you can always type in a new integer, and that might give you a little bit more wiggle room. So this guy is now looking pretty good. Now we've got a building that's looking really nice so far without a lot of work, but all of these are the same pieces. And in the case that I want this to alternate between not just this one piece, but also all 7 of those pieces, I need to add a new node. So let's go ahead and go back to our mesh library, which is going to be right here, mesh 2. And I'm going to add this node called an ID node. The ID node already gets to work and starts changing the IDs that it's picking for each of these new distributions based on numbers 1 through 7, because I have 7 cubes. It's going down the line in terms of counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way to 7. So it's going in a linear fashion, but I can always, navigate to my mesh2 underscore ID node and change it from linear to random. And so now it's going to randomly pick a number between 1 and 7, and that's what it's going to assign in my object. So now it's looking really cool, and if I need to, I can always kind of come back and tweak some of this stuff up. It looks like some of these guys are getting a little bit crowded, but that's a very easy fix, and it's non-destructive, so I can always kind of go back and edit this. If I want them to be a little bit more squished together, I can absolutely do that. But that's looking pretty good. So that's how we can very quickly put together unique looking buildings that we can use for, if our environment needs something like this. So that's one really cool way to use the mesh network for this type of procedural modeling, but I also wanted to show you another form, in this case, I want to develop a cityscape or a skyline using these very, very simple buildings, like literal building blocks. And I've got 13 of these guys that I want to be laid out upon this very large plane. So, just like before, make sure that these guys are UV unwrapped and textured or ready to texture if that's kind of the direction that you want to go. But I'm going to select all 13 of these guys and I'm going to create a mesh network. Same thing again, it'll give us a library that we can pick from, and it'll also give us a distribute node, which already distributes ID number 1 down the line. And I'm going to change our distribution type from linear, not necessarily to grid, but I'm going to choose paint effects right here. Now it doesn't do anything because it doesn't work alone, and I need to add a new node, so let's come back up to mesh 1, and I'm going to add what we call a placer node right here. So with that added in, this will allow me to paint on a surface or on a different object, kind of the different portions or the different buildings that I have selected. So before I start painting, I'm going to change some attributes over here just to help it set up. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on scatter. This lets it kind of randomly scatter the painted objects or my buildings on my space, so that way it's not drawn in a very clean line. I'm also going to change my ID from fixed to random, and here I can enter in 13 at this largest area, so now it's going to count from 1 to 13. So now I've got all 13 buildings that are going to be painted whenever I do so. A couple of things that I like to do here as well is I'll change the rotation axis on Y to, we'll say 30 degrees or something like that. This just kind of rotates them at random just a little bit, and that kind of helps break up some of the uniformity that you may get sometimes. But that's a totally optional thing. And then I'm going to turn off rotation mode just to make sure that I don't have anything weird going on with my brush. You can leave that as aligning to the mesh, but I like to turn it off and kind of work with it in my workflow. So with all of those little adjustments made, I'm going to click on this add icon right here, and now this allows me to add buildings. I can increase or decrease the size of my brush by holding B and middle mouse click, but I can also change it right here, and you can see that slider doing so. So now I'm painting away and I'm putting down a whole bunch of different buildings, and it's starting to really develop and look really good. And if I lean in close, especially from kind of this weird aerial view, it's looking fantastic so far. So I can make these cities as dense as I want them to be. I can also come back with this delete icon, and just like an eraser, I can go through and carve out, let's say, where a river might be. But I can continuously paint in areas of density to whatever level that I want it to be at. So this is a very quick and easy way to paint on kind of a list of objects or a library of objects procedurally. This is really helpful for things like forests as well, where if you have just a handful of different tree types or shrubs, you can paint those in onto a space very quickly and cover, a forest in relative ease without having to hand place each individual tree. So hopefully this will be a useful tool that you guys might find kind of applicable in your workflow. But of course, if you have any questions about how to use this, feel free to let me know. But until next time, I will see you guys later. Hopefully this helps. Bye-bye.